Hello everyone, welcome to today's Industry Solutions webinar. My name is Lisa Stewart. 12d's Industry Solutions webinars are designed to provide insights into overcoming challenges in an evolving industry in more effective and efficient ways. We'll be running these webinars regularly again this year and recording them for posting on our YouTube channels with links through our website. Our previous webinars from this Industry Solutions series, as well as those from our training series and our 2021 What's Coming from 12D series, are available online if you missed those. During today's presentation, you'll be able to type your questions along the way, as shown on the screen, and we'll answer as many as possible throughout the webinar. At the end, I'll read out some of your questions to the presenter if there's time. Today's webinar, 12D New GIS Interface, will be presented by Charlie Latchford, who does technical support for 12D-NZ. This webinar will highlight the new 12D Model 15 GIS interface, which enables users to import GIS features from the NZ LINZ Data Service website and from published GIS REST service or in-house GIS systems. Over to you, Charlie.
Thank you, Lisa. Today's webinar is to look at the new V15 GIS tools. Available in C1N and above. They're free for those on maintenance. There's a few different formats that we can actually import into 12D, and I'll open them all up first and explain them all. You've got the web map service, the WMS, which is an historic format for aerial photography. It's been depreciated over the last couple of years from the GIS systems and been replaced by the web map TAR service, which the LINZ data service and most GIS systems use. We've also got the ability to read in WFS, Web Feature Services, which includes the geometry and attributes of assets, predominantly in-house GIS systems. Then we've also got a reader specifically for the LINZ data service. That allows you to read in all the LINZ data into 12D, and we'll look at that in a second. Then finally, we've got the REST features, which is predominantly Three Waters Council as-built. But if the entity has an Esri GIS system and they have publicly facing web maps, those are generally being created using the REST feature within the Esri ecosystem. That allows 12D and other providers to consume those links, they are HTML links, and bring them into the software and then apply symbology and line styles to that data, but the attributes are driven by the GIS system. So if we look at the LINZ WFS options, it's free to use as long as you have an account with the LINZ data service, which is very easy to set up. It does require an API key for either the individual or the organization to comply with their common licensing rules that the LINZ data service has, and you can do the same thing from the coordinates website that has a few more layers that the LINZ data service doesn't have. So most layers can be imported into 12D in a local coordinate system without the need to reprojection. When I say most layers, things like the LiDAR information, you still need to bring in the raw ASCII points from the LINZ data service, but you can consume the tile locations from the LINZ data service. When that information is imported into 12D, unlike some of the normal exports from LINZ data service, the data is not dumb, it actually has attribute information that you can use. This import will not replace the Land Online XML extract, because LINZ on the LINZ data service, even though they have the vectors, they don't have attributes for every single underlying vector. So if you're doing any cadastral work, you will still need to use the Land Online export to bring that into 12D for your tracing. So if I just jump into the LINZ data service now, so we've got a section, for example, that we're looking in Christchurch, just away from the centre, and I've got a couple of layers that I want to import into 12D. I could do that within the LINZ data service. I would export, say, a DWG with no attributes, a tab file from from other systems with attributes, and I can do the same thing with the rest. As it just takes a bit of time to export those in. But in the LINZ data service, as long as you've got an account, and they're signed in, well, I've signed in here. You can see it's got my initial on the top right hand corner. You just need to create an API key. So you've got a couple of ways of doing that. If I come in here and go my API keys, I've got already an API key for the LINZ data service, and you can easily come in and you can go create LINZ data service. You can give it a name and go add, and that will create an individual API key for you. I just go cancel. I'm just going to copy that API key and then go into 12D model. So I've got a little rectangle for the area object within Christchurch that I want to extract not only the LINZ data service information, the REST features, and the aerial photography for this area. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to quickly look at the different options. So under File, GIS, you can see that I've got all the different options that we discussed. The LINZ data service, the REST, and the WMTS. We're not really going to be looking at these two other ones there, but they work on a very similar process to these other three. So we're going to look at the LINZ data service. I'm going to open this tab up. So what I need to do is I need to paste in my API key. Once that's in, it's just gone and downloaded all the layers that are available under my API key. And they're all the layers there that I could potentially download anything else from. And this is under the WFS layers. Actually, sorry, I didn't show you quickly within the LINZ data service. Sorry, if I just go back to access those layers. If I come back into my layers here, I've got the primary parcels. It's got all the information about the layer, when it was last updated, amount of downloads. But under the services and API key, you can see it's a WFS layer. I've got my API key that we just looked at already set up. You have the ability to download individual layers. If I were to copy that link, I'll get the individual layers. This particular layer. On this link here, I will get all the layers available. If I go back into 12D, I've got those available. They're here, all the different ones available. And if I start typing in parcels, I can have all these. The difference between some of these parcels is the attribute information that is exported from the LINZ data service. So I'm using the NZ parcels. You can see that I've got the primary parcels and things. Some of these will show different attributes like the appellation and other information. So I'm just going to use the NZ parcels. I'm going to place it in a model called NZ parcels. I've got to set my projection. In this case, my projection is Mount Pleasant 2000. And I want to come in and tell 12D that I want to use a spatial filter. So I want to do it with the within. We've got a few different types of attributes or filters. These have come from the GIS system. Most of these operators are very complex for doing a lot of manipulation if you needed to. The ones that I generally will use will be intersects or within. They're the two ones that I've found that actually work. So I'm going to go within that polygon, and I'm going to select that polygon. We've got the ability to download the attributes up front and do some manipulation on that if we wanted to, but I'm going to look at that more within the REST features. So I'm going to go read. It's gone off to the LINZ data service and downloaded those boundaries. If I were to come in here and go under strings, properties, attributes, and pick one of those lots, say this one here, you'll be able to see that I've got the appellation, I've got all the information that's in from the LINZ data service that are available. As mentioned before, that this is a one layer at a time. So if I wanted to do the non-primary, I would come in here and go non-primary and download all the easements. I'll just have to create a new model and download. But what we've actually done is we've created a chain that can do this. So I'm just going to close that down. I'm just going to go and delete that model. But I've got this chain up here. Well, we've got a toolbar, I should say, under GIS, under View Toolbars. If I go G for GIS, that actually just shows the GIS options. So first of all, I need to set the projection. So I've got this in this already set up as Mount Pleasant 2000. You just need to make sure that you select the NZ GD 2000 circuits. The reason for that is because they have the EPSG code, which is the universal coordinate code that goes from one coordinate system to another. So if I just go set and finish, I'm going to use this LINZ data service option. It just goes and runs a chain in the background. I'll run that and explain what the chain is afterwards. So it asks me for a prompt for my extents. So I'm just going to accept that. Then it's going to ask me for another prompt. Do you want to clean the existing data? I haven't got anything in here, so I'm just going to go no. It's going to go off. Sorry, 12D will go off to the LINZ data service, download a number of layers. So this is the primary parcels that we looked at, and it's done some non-primary in there as well. It's going to apply a map file. And the final thing it's going to do is to apply a label attribute map file. So if I zoom in a bit closer to this, I've got my appellation information for this lot 16. I'll just move that to the side. That's what we've used the label attribute map file to label any parcel which is a fee simple. And it's going to give it the appellation. The same for these control marks. I've got the LINZ geodetic code. I've got all those descriptions and the coordinate system and the elevation network datum that it's actually using. And that's what I've used to display this. One thing the chain does, and I'll bring the chain over so people can have a look at it. It asks you to enter your API key up there at the top. Then it comes down and cleans the models and creates the views if needed to. It's just reading, this chain is currently just reading the primary, the NZ parcels, and the geodetic marks, the sixth order vertical marks and the horizontal marks. Okay. It deploys an attribute map file and an attribute manipulator file. One of those things with the attribute manipulator file, I've moved that across, is information doesn't come through with string names. So I've applied that geodetic code in this case to that as a string name and then applied a label attribute map file, which is quite an easy process. And we can and we will give you these chains if you require. And right down the bottom, it deletes underlying historic information. So those title comes through with historic information, but you can filter those out if you needed to. If I go back into PowerPoint, we've got the ability to read in REST features, which it's generally council's three waters or other asset information that your council provides. It's free open source data. You can consume it, say, from councils or other territorial authorities, maybe even private asset owners if they have a GIS feed that's available for people. The data is a snapshot in time. It is not a live database. So when you run the REST features or the LINZ data service, we're just taking that data as it sits at that moment in time. Attributes will come through and the geometry comes through. In the Three Waters instance, we could use the tools that we have in MetaConnects to update attribute values and then to buy that information back to the council. So when I say that is, imagine you've got an upgrade of a wastewater network, which is quite common in Christchurch. They would potentially change some of the attribute values. One would be the lid level, but you want to link that to the underlying asset ID from the GIS information, and that's what we can do within the MetaConnects, and then do all the calculations for the attributes for the as-built, and then pass that back to the council if you're required. User then can apply a map file, which allows them to have consistent model names, line styles, and symbologies to the data set. So if I go back into 12D, we've got this little option at the top here, or I'll show you the long way around to do it. So we're going to go File, REST. This is very similar to the other feature. I'm just going to get the URL for the Christchurch City Council, and in the example data we give you, we've actually listed the ones that we have found. So that's the Christchurch City one. If I go enter, all the services have been downloaded and looked at. So I'm going to come in, and these are what's available under the Christchurch City Council. So I'm just look under the wastewater. I'm going to look under the chambers. I'm going to bring that into a model called chambers. I've got to finally set the projection for the import. Unpleasant. We're going to use these general the spatial filters again, and we're going to use the same selection. If I go back in, instead of intersects, actually we'll use intersects because within these assets have all come in, all joined together. So if I use within, it will fail because there's no individual assets within there. They're all joined across the whole of Christchurch, so I have to go intersect. So intersects within that polygon, and we can also use attribute filters as well, and I'll come back to that in a second. If I go read, you'll see that down the bottom it says read data has been imported, and I can just change or add that view model to the view. I'll bring the panel back up with the string attributes. If I were to go and pick on one of these attributes, you can see that the information has come through from the council's GIS. One big note is that we have created this some chains specifically for each region, each council, or the major councils, I should say, as an example only. Every single council has different aliases. When I say aliases, the attribute names for their assets. So these will be different from council to council. When we've imported this into 12D, we've got a link to the URL, where it came from, which service layer at the top level, and the lower level branch for the layer that we've imported this data set together. I'm just going to delete that layer. And we've got a chain. In fact, we've actually got a chain within a chain. So we've got this processing chain that we'll run in a second. We have the regional chains. In this case, I've enabled the Christchurch City Council example, but we have got one for QLDC, Auckland and Wellington Water. So that will go and find those 3 or the 4 major cities for the information. It goes and runs off a chain in the background, and I'll just run that and show you what it is and then come back to the chain in a second. I'm going to use the REST toolbar. Of course, it's on the other screen. I've already set the projection, so we're already in Mount Pleasant, sorry. I'm going to select my polygon, go finish. It's asking me, do I want to clean the existing model? And I'm going to go yes for this time. That yes and no just allows you to see if you're adding more information for another area. If you didn't capture it fully in the first time, you can just add that. So the chain just going off and downloading several layers at a time. I've pre-downloaded some of those because it's based on my internet speed between my office and the GIS server. And showing this via Teams actually does slow down the processing time. So I've just done some of those up front. But if I were to do this, it would take, for this whole area, which is quite a substantial area, it would take about 3 or 4 minutes to download. And we've got the chain to add layer by layer to the view, so the user can actually see a layer added and then it's processing in the time, opposed to just having a blank screen. So then the chain just goes through and applies a map file to the data set. And then it also goes through and does a label, attribute label file. So if I just scroll in, I just want to change that setting there for this view to say to 1 to 200. If I just change the edges, I want to change the edges because I want to actually just bring the primary parcels in a second. You can see that 12D has created or downloaded all the information. And if I want to go and pick, you can see all those attributes. But what we've done an extra step within the attribute manipulator file is that we have put all the information into our own 12D branch, and that allows us to use an attribute manipulator file for all of the different councils, but use one singular label attribute map file. I'll show you the chain in the background. This has exactly like we've got beforehand. If I go and preview, that's on the other screen, it has got the model, the map service that we're coming from the Christchurch City Council. We've got the layers that we've got, and then we've got the information that we're downloading. One difference in here, I've got in here under the attribute filter, because Christchurch has gone through a lot of rebuild in the past. I've got a filter that says, hey, I only want to download the in-service assets. But if you're doing a design and you want to see what's actually been is still in the ground, the abandoned assets, you probably want to remove that. But we've allowed that within the map file that we look in the background to have the different option that will do a filter. So I've got back in the chain, I've got all of these different layers that are available, and you'll notice that I've switched a few off just for the presentation. So there's also within that main chain, we have actually got a map file. So if I just open the map file, it's quite a large map file. It's got a lot of filters or use of the attribute keys within the data set. So I'm just waiting for 12D to read that. Under the basic tab, you'll notice that we've got the LINZ data services uses the same map file for the reduction. We use the concept of these attribute keys. So imagine that as like a filter of the data. So if I were to click on here, so if I have got a parcel intent as fee simple, 12D will apply a name and put it in a model and apply some colors. So we've done the same thing for the REST features. You can see I've got a REST feature for Christchurch City Council. The other ones are further below because of their attribute aliases are different from council to council. In this case, I've got the wastewater mains. I've got an attribute filter as if it has come through from the GIS layer WW pipes, and also it's got a service status of removed, then it will use that as a filter to give it a name, a model, and a color. So I've done that for quite a lot of the assets, and you can see why we've got 3s and 4s. We've got quite a few attribute filters in there, and it's quite a detailed example. This does not cover every single asset that's within each of the councils. These are just an example only to give you an understanding of the workflows that you can build upon. So we've got the stormwater, we've got the water supplies, and you can go down. We've got the Auckland and the other information. So that's the REST features. If I want to then add in my boundary information, you can see that that's layered above that. And the final one would be going back into the PowerPoint, and we can download the WMTS, which is the aerial photography. Generally, the information and council's GIS systems and the LINZ data service is in the WMTS format. We have the ability to download these files as JPEGs, or not JPEGs, PNG files in the background. They are substantially smaller than importing the native JPEG file into 12D. I'll show you that shortly. But it also allows the users to import rasters at different resolution scales. So you could have a lower resolution for, say, half the city for your location diagram. But if you want a detailed drawing for your design or your topographical survey, you could have it at a different resolution level for your detail drawings. One downside is that the data is stored in NZTM. We do need to reproject that location polygon from local circuit in NZTM before we actually import the aerial photography. Then we have to reproject it back into local circuit. So if I just go back into 12D, and if I go back into my location, I'm just going to come under survey conversions, and I'm just going to convert this from GD2000 local circuit. So I'm going to come in circuit. The circuit that I am using is Mount Pleasant, and I'm going to output that to NZTM. So I'm just going to select that model, copy it to NZTM, and go process. I'm going to add that. So that's polygon is now in NZTM. I'm going to come down and I'm going to look at the WMTS option. This is going to come from the LINZ data service. So if I just quickly jump back into the LINZ data service, I'm going to download this Christchurch aerial photography, which is quite recently added to the LINZ data service. But if I go under services, you can see it's a WMTS layer. So I could download this individual layer or all layers. So I'm just going to copy that individual, the all layers. Come back into 12D. Actually, and I've just got that already set up. You can see here that it has got the Christchurch City layer because that's individual. But if I were to place in the layers, you will see in here, I've got all the information that can be downloaded from the LINZ data service under the WMTS. It's in GD2000. I've got to then decide on the scale that I will want to use. So we've got this thing here, which is the tile identifier. This is more for the GIS of users. It's probably doesn't make sense to people, other non-GIS users, I should say. 0 being the large scale, probably the half of Christchurch or the whole South Island, and 16 being the one very detailed, probably 1 to 250. But what I would personally be using is the scale option here. If I wanted this 1 to 250, 320,000, I would use that, or 1 to 250. I'm just going to use the 1 to 500. I'm going to put it into this model. I've just got to tell 12D that I want to use this polygon here. So it's going to download those files. I have pre-downloaded some of these files in the background, but if I wanted to go read, it would download 680 tiles. And those tiles, if I just go yes, I'll just start downloading it. Down here in the bottom corner, 12D is just telling me it is downloading some of those tiles. And that tile cache location is within this project. So you could potentially put that in a different location within your company server if you needed to, but you just got to realize that you've got data storage on disk to think about. Under here, we've got the particular layer we downloaded from the LINZ data service, and under level, I've downloaded level 13 and level 15. You can see that I've got all the different tiles. If I drill into the tiles, you've got all these PNG files that we're going to use together to kind of stitch together within 12D. If I wanted to come in here and look at my level 15, you've got quite detailed aerial photography for this part of Christchurch. But say if I wanted just the lower level, just a placeholder for my aerial maps, if I come in here and say I want to choose, say 1 to say 25,000, I'm just going to call that 25,000. Right, so it's level number 7. I'm just going to read that. See, it's only got 1 tile, and yes, I do want to in that 1 tile. I'll turn that back off, and I would turn that 1 layer. So you can see it's a lower resolution image, and it covers pretty much the whole of Christchurch. So that would be perfect for a low resolution location. So what we need to do is we need to then, because this is in NZTM, we need to convert this back from NZTM to local circuits. So instead output is going to be circuit, and that circuit is going to be Mount Pleasant. As long as I select the model, and in this case, it's going to be the level 15, and do the replace the existing 12D will reproject that into the correct location. It will come back into this view, scroll out a tiny bit, and I'll come in here and level 15, it has actually been added. What I should have done, I'll show you a new thing, and I'm kind of getting used to it in 12D. If I wanted to add that level 15 in there, we've got a little icon down the bottom here that will automatically add your tin or your raster to the back of the view. So there's no need to go view, send tins and rasters to the back. It automatically does that. So I've now got my property boundaries. I've got my rest features. If I turn my rest features on, change my scale, say to 200, and there, they've got all my information there from the LINZ data service or the council. And finally, if you do want the chains and everything else within that we're available with the guide we have created, you can email the support at 12d.co.nz. You do need C1N and above, which is on the 12D main website to download now. And that's all. I'll hand back to you, Lisa. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Charlie. We've just had a couple of questions through, so I'll just read a couple of these out for you now, Charlie. Just hopefully we can help some of these people out live. So we had one through from Mike that said, how can I edit the display label for the parcels? The example didn't show any DCDB application labels.
Okay, that's an easy one, Lisa. I must admit, when I created the workflow, I used an area that has got a relatively recent subdivisions in, but if I scroll into the map, use those DCB, I'll show my screen, sorry. You should be able to see my screen now. I didn't press that right button.
Yep.
The DCB ones are these magenta lines, and I actually have in part of the chain there is a label map file, and that map file actually has all the names, so it's gone under the fee simple parcels, and that's why the fee simple parcels actually have the appellation, and those in the DCB doesn't. So I would have to come in here and add a new layer and specifically put in the name for the DCB layer.
Great. And we had one from Nicole. For WFS or WMS within GIS software, data is shown live. In 12D model, does it update live as well, or is it actually being downloaded as a local copy?
It is downloaded as a local copy at a time, a snapshot in time. It's not live back from the GIS. But you could potentially rerun those chains, and those part of those chains is they will go and clear out the existing models and then re-import the information.
Sure. Okay, fabulous. I think the other questions that came through might be a bit complicated to answer live, so I'll send them through to you shortly, Charlie, and you can get back to people by email.
Great, thank you.
So thanks everyone for your great questions, and thank you, Charlie, for that presentation. The recording of today's webinar will be available in coming days through the webinars page on our website and on our 12D Model YouTube channel. Keep an eye on our emails and social media for details of future webinars. And don't forget, our 12D Tech Forum is back to being an in-person event this year in Brisbane, so grab your tickets for that too. If you need to contact us in the meantime, you can always email us or go to our website for your local contacts. That concludes our presentation for today. Thank you so much for attending, and we hope to see you at future webinars.